Welcome to Beyond Tech, where innovation meets insight. I'm your host, Jackie Slatt. Today's episode tackles a critical but often misunderstood question. Is your facility actually secure, or are you just assuming it is? In OT environments, most cyber incidents don't begin with sophisticated attacks. They start with exposure, unknown assets, flat networks, or misconfigured access points. And too often, organizations rely on outdated assessments or incomplete visibility, creating a false sense of security. To dig into this, I'm joined by a special guest co-host, Wayne Hensley, a business development manager here at eTech Group. Wayne brings a valuable client-side perspective. He's seen firsthand the impact of cyber incidents, from rising insurance costs to entire facilities being locked out due to undetected vulnerabilities. We're also joined by our subject matter experts, Brian Gifford, an IT/OT cybersecurity engineering lead at eTech Group. Brian works at the intersection of automation, data systems, and cybersecurity, helping organizations design, secure, and scale connected environments across both IT and OT. So today we'll unpack where these risks are coming from, what organizations may be missing, and most importantly, practical steps you can take to become more secure and proactive in your cybersecurity strategy. So with that, let's dig in and get the conversation started.
Hey, thanks, Jackie. Hey, Brian, good to see you again, buddy. And I'm glad to be here. We've been in several client engagements and seen a lot of different catalysts for driving these things, but still, I guess OT cybersecurity incidents are still the primary spark for really digging into these things and not really planning in forethought. Can you expand on that a little bit for me?
Sure. So it's easy not to fix the risk you don't recognize. And until someone actually exploits that risk, we don't always want to take care of it. And the industrial environment, the uptime and operational output is what makes money. And fixing risks is not an immediate revenue generator. So it's not something that usually shows up on people's horizon. So I think it's easy to kind of get into your day-to-day life and not think about the things that might happen, focus on the things that are happening, and those risks, and understanding those risks only comes with experience. And sometimes that experience can be pretty painful.
Agreed.
So what do you think, Brian, or what have you seen when you're out talking with clients or hearing their stories? What's the biggest risk for OT cybersecurity?
So the biggest risk that we've seen is segmentation. We talk a lot about the risks that are inherent in OT, because a lot of the stuff has a mean time between failure that's measured in decades. So a lot of it was built before security was really a thought. And a lot of the newer stuff, even the stuff that's being built now, the security still really isn't built in as a starting point. It's built in as an add-on, or something that we're tacking on after the fact. So the stuff that most people talk about when we look at cyber risk, we're looking at that outside edge. We're looking at what can people see from outside of your network, and what can people who are working inside your network do by accident. Usually it's not usually malicious, but it happens maliciously. But what things can impact your operational uptime, and that outside edge is the starting point.
And Brian, you and I have seen a number of different scenarios, and we've seen technology change both on the security side and on the tools for assessing risk, really doing the analysis, not just in the past year, the past months. It's changed pretty rapidly. Position for me old ways of looking at risk and how we're approaching it now.
I mean, AI is one of the biggest pieces that's changed, but the old way of looking at risk was, I have a checklist. I need to run through my checklist in order to be risk-free. And if I've checked all the boxes, then I'm good. It's not really looking at whether or not those boxes make sense for your environment. It's not, if you're aligning to a framework, that's great. But if you're not looking at what the practical application of that stuff is inside your environment, making sure that it actually remediates a risk, then it's not really useful. So the old way was, looking at a checklist and going through an inspection check sheet. The new way is actually doing evaluations in real time, taking a look at penetration tests, taking a look at a live look at your protocols and ports that are open inside a network, taking a live look at how much traffic can actually pass through a link instead of what we assume the maximum output is, taking a look at hard segmentation. Can I actually pass traffic between 2 points that are supposed to be segmented from each other? I may have checked that box off on the list, but it might not actually be really segmented. So making sure that I've got ground truth, making sure that I have a really clear understanding of what actually is happening inside my network instead of simply checking boxes off. That's probably the difference between then and now.
And one of the things that you and I have seen working with several different clients is, an assessment adds a lot of visibility on here's the state of things right now, and a kind of a plan rank priority of, hey, here's what we can do to mitigate some of those risks. What about continuing visibility? Because several of our clients are now leveraging ongoing tool, not just a snapshot, but let's look at what's changing 2 months after the assessment?
Sure. I mean, our operational environments are not static. The plants are constantly changing, they're constantly evolving. There's new technologies or just replacement parts. If a switch fails, the engineers that are putting that network back together may not put it back together the same way. Or if a new part comes in, it might have a different firmware version, or it might lead to other changes that have to happen downstream from that in order to be functional. And those changes that naturally happen in an operational environment over time, they're not always captured. They're very rarely captured. So having real-time monitoring, having something that's keeping an eyeball on your environment, not so that it's every couple of years, but every couple of minutes, you're going to look at ground truth and be able to see exactly what the status of that environment is right now, which is huge because it means, again, if I'm checking boxes on a checklist, that's one thing. If I actually know exactly where my risks are at this moment, minutes after an engineer has finished installing a box that says that it's good, and I can go and check those against vulnerabilities or what ports are open to it, how it's segmented from the rest of the network, what else it might be broadcasting. All of those are things that will help me understand my network immediately instead of waiting for downtime to happen. I can get ahead of it and stop the downtime from happening at all.
And just to add on to that, one of the things that we've done with these clients is we both monitor this ongoing view, this portal into what's happening, and that has been valuable in that sometimes we know before our client knows an event's happened.
That's impressive. I know from past conversations and my kind of limited understanding of cybersecurity and how attacks happen, that sometimes that you may have someone access the network and just kind of sit there for like months, just kind of observing. So if you can stop that before they do anything, that feels like a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah. And we talked a little about AI. AI is starting to be leveraged on some of that stuff too. We're seeing those in network sims that are allowing us to see. So if someone's sitting inside your network and they're watching things, they have a command and control link, they've got beaconing that's happening. Those things are a message style. There's a cadence to those that can be identified by artificial intelligence because it's looking for patterns. And if we see something that's pinging an outside address, some faraway IP someplace, and it's doing so every couple of minutes or every couple of days, that's something that the AI security tools are trained to identify that that's not a typical thing, that's something that probably indicates a bad actor or at least something we should pay attention to. So 100%, if someone does compromise a system inside an OT environment, being able to see that in real time, having tools that are able to recognize those patterns that happen over time. Those are really important pieces.
So I think you've kind of touched on this a bit, and we've kind of already talked about it. But what does network visibility actually mean in the OT environment? Is it kind of just how things are connected, or what is it showing?
So network visibility can mean a couple of things. We want to understand our logical topology. So how a network is laid out in physical space versus how it's laid out in logical space. So I might have everything connected to a switch, but the devices that I have on there may need to operate as if they're in a ring. So the physical and what's happening under the hood might be a little different. So part of that is visibility of topology. And if, say, one of the pieces of that logical ring breaks, if I have network visibility, then I know that and I can respond to that immediately. I can also see things like if a device fails and starts broadcasting help traffic, hey, come find me, I've got a problem. That can impact other devices. So the fact that it's broadcasting screams for help can actually impact older PLCs, can cause other problems in the network. And if we identify that through our network visibility tools, we can go and fix that device before it causes other problems and creates some of that operational downtime. We can also see other pain points. We can see misconfigurations. The network visibility really means that you understand what's happening in your network in real time. It's some of those real-time management tools we've been talking about. It also gives you the ability to understand what needs to change over time. So expenses that happen when we don't expect them are bad news. If we have an expense that comes up and the C-suite gets a bill, that's not a good thing if we haven't talked about that stuff ahead of time. But if you know something's failing, or if you know the lifetime of something, then you have a planned expense. And the planned expense is something that's much more palatable. We can figure out how we're going to deal with it. We can approach it with a phased plan for accomplishing remediation. So having planned changes is always a good idea. And network visibility tools give us some of those as well.
Jackie, to be edited out, I'm going to stack a couple of questions here for Brian.
All right.
And Brian, we talked about the assessment and kind of ongoing monitoring tools and stuff. So I'm going to take a step back in that, like most all solutions ETAG provides our clients, it's tailored to what their needs are. So it's customized. So outline for me we're talking about a first time assessment. What's the strategy and tactics we're using that are available to us? And as a follow of that, we've already acknowledged that we need to monitor, and it's always a moving target. So how often should we be repeating this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we have a number of different products, and it really depends on what the customer's pain points are. So the strategy always starts with an interview with the customer. You need to find out what their requirements are. And part of that's going to be what the customer believes their requirements are. And from our experience, we might see a slightly different path. If they're looking at network performance, but we're identifying that they have a lot of really old stuff in their network, then it may not be the IT/OT network assessment we want to do. We may want to do our inventory assessment instead, because and we'll talk through what the differences are between those two assessments of the customer. If they want to do both, that's an option as well. So we have 4 essential products that we go through for assessments. We've got the IT/OT network assessment, which if you're looking at Purdue model layers, it's Purdue model layers 2, 3, and 4. And that's all your network infrastructure. So it's your core switching, it's the core control systems, down to your distribution layer switching, and down to your access panel switch. So it's all of your network stuff. How am I transmitting information back and forth around the plant or the operation? And then the next piece is an inventory assessment, where we look at the devices themselves. So we look at anything with an IP address or MAC address, PLCs, HMIs, drives, stuff like that. And we get a very clear understanding. We get a complete inventory of those devices. We look at them all the way down to the catalog number. We find out what their firmware version is. We give you an understanding of life cycle on all of those pieces. And that has been a really useful tool for companies to be able to understand what their current risk is from a life cycle standpoint. How old is the stuff in their inventory? What needs to be replaced? What's been operating for 20 years and might need a little bit of love? It's a great place to start. There's a lot of companies that find that product really valuable. And a combination of the two is always available too. At the top of that layer, we do cybersecurity risk assessments and cyber compliance. So we take a look at a company's cybersecurity posture. One of the things that's happened in recent years is insurance companies have tied your cyber risk to your premiums. So if you're not compliant with the cyber risk framework, you have more expensive premiums. So tying dollars to that risk compliance has given companies an appetite to start approaching these things instead of waiting for something to happen. They're actually looking to be proactive, which is what the insurance companies are looking for. So doing a cyber risk assessment and doing a cyber compliance assessment, that gives us the ability to help a company understand what their current posture is. Do they have programs and policies that are in place to support cyber compliance? Do they have business continuity plans or incident response plans? Do they have a password policy that makes sense? Do they have a mobile device policy that makes sense? And we help them get to the point where they understand what their risk is. And it's a product that they can hand to their insurance company to help reduce some of those premiums. And then as a kind of an added piece, we look at a Wi-Fi assessment, which will give a company a clear understanding of all of the radio frequency stuff that's happening inside their environment. So Wi-Fi interactions across all 3 bands, exactly how many access points I can hit from any given point, if I have overlap, if I've got frequencies that are competing with each other. It's a solid understanding for a growing market. A lot of companies are starting to move to wireless because it's easy to deploy, to understand where those pain points might be that might cause downtime or interference or performance issues inside the operational environment. So there's a wide catalog of stuff that we can accomplish in terms of assessing the current status for a company. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. These are concrete deliverables, but it really depends on what the customer's pain points are. We usually start there.
Good, thank you. And just to kind of as a follow-on, this is an observation. You and I have been involved in a number of asset assessments, and you kind of frame that into reducing security risk, meaning that and insurance, cost reduction justification stuff. One of the things that we've seen, we deal a lot with clients in regulated industries, food and beverage, life sciences, chemical, consumer goods, and it's critical that their assets be up to date for them to make product for them to sell. So it's not just a security risk or staying up and going. It's if I'm going to sell my product X, then I need to be up to date in all these areas and be able to document that and show it.
Yeah,
and so
validated process.
Yeah. So keep my plan up and running so I can sell product is pretty key. The most of them.
How often should an organization be re-looking to reassess the environment, and why is that so important?
It depends on the pace of the company. We kind of talked about those leave behind products that are going to give you visibility full time. Those are the ideal. If I have something in my environment that's giving me an up-to-date map, it's giving me ground truth day to day, that's the best answer, because it gives me something that I can point to at any given time, and I can see the change over time as well. So if a company is not going to do a service like that, then it really depends on how fast the company changes. If they've had the same stuff and they're not making changes, if they don't have old equipment, if it was a greenfield project from 5 years ago, then maybe they don't need to do it quite as often. Maybe once a year, once every 2 years might be something that will still give them what they need. But I would still highly, highly recommend looking at tools that will stay in your environment, that will give you the ability to understand what's happening in real time. Emphasizing that ability. I mean, it's visibility, it's analytics, it's costs, it's uptime. I think it impacts every aspect of the company's business operations.
Yeah, well, and I think to your point, like every things are continuously changing. So having something that is continuously monitoring and keeping you up to date is very important.
Let's roll back to results for just a second, Brian. We're looking at an assessment going in, whether it's assets or exposure or bandwidth, all those things. What are the most common things that your team is seeing? What's the top 5?
Top 5 issues?
Yeah.
It's the number one.
Exposure risk. Let me be
Okay.
specific.
Exposure risk is a little different. So I would say that the top issue that we see is segmentation. So the exposure of assets inside an OT environment to the internet. That's a huge one. So if I can digress just a little bit, the way an attack happens. An attacker they always start with the first phase. The first phase is reconnaissance. They always want to go find their target. And they may not be looking for whatever the company is specifically. They're looking for a company with exposure. They're looking for a company that has something that's open to the internet, that can be accessed, that is running a protocol that's known to be compromised, or that has a piece of equipment that they know they can get into. So the companies that are exposing their stuff to the internet are making themselves those targets. They're opening themselves up to that initial search, that initial reconnaissance. And there are sites that all they do is crawl the internet all day looking for and mapping what open ports and what open IPs you have on your network. So finding that stuff without exposing that, if a bad actor wants to find those things, they don't have to necessarily show you that they're looking at you at all. They just go browse one of these sites that looks at all this stuff full time. They find something that meets their target criteria, and then they go attack that target. So the first most important thing in top 5, I would say the top 3 are exposure. The top 3 are that outside edge of your network where you're putting yourself on one of those lists where it's easy for them to find you and target you because you fit the bill for whatever their target profile is. Next one is probably age. A lot of times because of the way OT works, because of talked before about the mean time between failure measured in many years, it's easy to operate with older equipment. And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, and it doesn't mean that those equipment shouldn't stay in the environment, but we do need to understand what risks they offer. They may not have any security, they may not have any visibility, they may not be able to participate in new analytical tools, which means you may not understand what they're doing at a given time. So understanding what those risks are from an age standpoint, I would say is probably number 2. And then for number 3, I would look at secure remote access. A lot of times vendors and companies need to be able to access their equipment to do maintenance on them, and they don't want to necessarily have to pay someone to come out to the site to do that. So it's easy to take a shortcut and offer someone access from the outside of your company to come in and manage one of your pieces of equipment. And that might be safe for one time, maybe. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's kind of safe for a short duration of time. But it's very easy to forget that you've left that port open, or you forget that you have that thing still connected to an outside port. So when we do those things, it's easy for that to creep up on us and end up with a bunch of things that are exposed to the internet by accident because we haven't shut those things off after the fact. So having a good secure remote access program, making sure you're tracking all that stuff when you open them, make sure to close them, preferably having a tool that does so securely on its own and making sure that it only has access to the things you want it to for a short period of time. I think that's number 3.
So those are the top risks that you see. What are some quick wins that a client could take to reduce these risks? Always the most important thing is keeping running without, taking too much downtime to implement any of these solutions.
Or costing crazy money on the way in, because a lot of times your capital expenditures, it's very tightly controlled. It's difficult to carve that money out. So understanding and having planned controlled costs, that's really important in these projects. So I would say having an understanding of ground truth to start with, to know what your pain points are, that's the starting point. We really need to start with understanding what the scope of the issues are. And from there, we can prioritize. And once we have a prioritized list of what the customer needs to do in order to be safe, in order to stay uptime, in order to provide visibility, then we identify what a phased remediation plan looks like so that they don't have to carve out all of it at one time. We can give them some of the remediation, the most important stuff up front. So does that answer the question, or did I miss a piece of it?
Well, so I guess what would you start with? So once you have this phased approach, what would be the first items that could help reduce the risk right away?
So say a customer has a network that's very challenged. They're open to the internet. They don't have any segmentation. Their IT and OT networks are operating in the same area. maybe using the same domain. So everything is really connected to everything else, and they have internet access. They have devices that are daisy chained. So we have, instead of using, say, star topologies that are very redundant, resilient, they have a switch that's attached to a switch that's attached to another switch all the way down the line. And if any of those switches fail, you lose everything down the line from that point. If I have a network that has all of those problems in there, I'm probably going to start by looking at the age of the devices and seeing what their operational requirements are. For me, the first thing is going to be the outside edge. I want to make sure that they're secure from threats outside, but I'm also focused on security. That's my primary, that's my passion. It's where I come from. So they might be more focused on the operational uptime, in which case the first thing we might want to remediate is to look at some of those daisy chain switches. We might want to alter how the plant is laid out in terms of the network topology to make sure that they've got redundant links, so that if any piece of that fails, they still have uptime and they still have the ability to identify it and go and fix it. And then usually after I have the network segmentation and the backbone kind of completed, then I'll look at secure remote access, making sure that we have very tightly controlled firewall rules. I mean, it's more the security focus at that time. Most plants are focused more on the uptime piece than the security piece until we get the insurance money involved.
Yeah.
or unless they've been hit already. And that's another thing that we've seen a lot. We'll see companies that have been hit that are now, they really want to engage on this because they have the momentum. So the security stuff becomes more important than the operational uptime. And they don't have to be exclusive. Establishing a better network topology inside your network is going to give you both.
Jackie, I'm going to take an unplanned side trip here.
Oh, I'm
Based
excited.
on comment, you talk about how OT and IT sometimes get blended together. And we've also seen where they need to operate, they need to be monitored, they need to be managed drastically different. Can you touch on that? Because we live, eTech lives primarily in the OT environment, which is very different than IT's view of the operational world in many cases.
Yeah, totally different priorities, right? So your OT's priority is uptime. Can I stay up? Can I stay productive? Can I stay efficient? IT's priority is more on the security side. They're more compliance based. There's more an ability to take the time to kind of enact those rules and policies. Sometimes the rules don't make sense, but we still have the time to enact them. So it's a difference in kind of practical application versus having a little more flexibility in the IT space. If something goes down, we get sad because we can't get access to our smart sheets, but we're not losing money in the plant, right? So there's definitely, if I'm managing both networks by the same set of priorities, especially if IT is primary, because IT usually has more of the network experience side. So a lot of times you see that as the way it happens is IT is managing OT and they're managing it using IT kind of priorities. You're definitely going to see some conflict. And we often see OT engineers and the IT space conflicting over what should happen and why because of those differences in requirements. And managing those relationships, trying to help them kind of bridge those gaps and achieve synergy without necessarily giving up each other's silos is one of the things we're pretty good at too.
Thanks.
Can you share an example of, I guess, when we have gone in and completed an assessment and uncovered a kind of risk that the client was not aware of?
Sure. So we went into a plant a couple of months ago and we did an assessment and we talked about daisy chained switches. They were not aware that they had two of their lines that were entirely daisy chained.
What does that mean? Sorry.
Instead of going from say a central switch or a central switch stack, where if one of my switches fails, I still have the other one to fall back on and I have redundant links that are outbound. So kind of like a spider. Instead of that, I have, say, a switch at one end of the line that then connects to another switch part of the way down the line that then connects to another switch and then another switch. Ideally, I would have one distribution switch or a distribution stack, a redundant stack that would connect to each of the switches on the line. So I have the ability to fail in any one of those points and I only lose a small portion of my line. But if I have switches connected to switches all the way down the line, if I lose an upstream switch, I lose all of the switches down below that point. So it increases the risk of failure. What we call the blast radius. It increases the blast radius of failure at some point in the network.
It's reminding me of the old Christmas lights where if one light went out, they all went out.
Yeah, all went out. One of my favorite songs.
Okay, sorry. That was just wanted to make sure
the customer didn't know that they had that going on in their network. So we identified that and that became a very high priority because we saw the risk in there.
So let's go back to the top three. What are the top three gotchas? I didn't know I had that list on assessments when we go into a plant and start uncovering stuff.
So secure remote access is a big one. A lot of times we'll see companies that will start down the secure remote access pathway and they'll start with E1s, which are great tools. They do great things, but they're kind of specific to one location. They don't do a kind of a centrally managed option for the standard E1s that we see. And we'll find out that they've got stuff that's connected to a bunch of different things that are still exposed to the outside. Kind of that leaving those exposed ports that can be scanned and people will notice them. Because they're an easy ingress point. Or another one is we talked about some of that topology stuff. So those gotchas identifying that they have connected switches just where they need switches instead of necessarily in an order that makes sense. Not looking at that star topology and making themselves a redundant link so that they can absorb a failure, or if something goes wrong, or if someone kicks a plug someplace and they lose part of their switching, they still have access to their network and they can still continue to operate. And then I would say vulnerability patching. So a lot of times for our HMIs and our engineering workstations, they're running Windows or sometimes Linux. And because they're not connected to the network, if it's done correctly, then they're not connected outbound into the internet, which means they can't pull updates, which is great because they're segmented, but it's also not so great because it means they're very behind. So having a secure patching standard, so knowing that you have a patching cadence and making patches happen when you have downtime in the plant, that's probably another really big one.
So after an organization has completed an assessment, or we've worked with a client on an assessment, how do you recommend, or how do they balance the priorities of like cybersecurity versus visibility versus, I guess, any other updates that they may want to make given what they found out during the assessment?
That's why they use us, because we have the experience to be able to identify some of those priorities. So it goes back to those conversations. We want to understand what their priorities are as a company, not necessarily in terms of remediation, but understanding what makes the most pain. Is it downtime? Is it the risk remediation stuff so that we can start to save some money on those cyber premiums, the insurance premiums? We start off by conversations with the customer to really understand what they need, and then we'll give them recommendations on what we think the priority should be. And we'll back those recommendations up with hard data. This is the impact of these things. If you don't update these PLCs, you've got a 30% risk of losing one or two of these in the next 2 years. And the cost of your downtime, because you don't have spares on hand, are going to be approximately whatever it is. It depends on what we're doing. If the engagement includes a budgetary estimate on downtime, because we do risk management there too. So it really, it's a two-way conversation. It's not just us identifying that stuff and handing it to the customer. It really needs to be a conversation with the customer to make sure that we really understand what they need, that we're giving them recommendations that make sense for their situation and for their budget and for their requirements.
I think, Brian, we talked about segmenting IT and OT, different priorities and stuff, but a lot of the applications and data that we're helping clients manage and put in place are bending those lines. They're punching holes in those lines. So we're pushing data down, we're collecting data in historians and data lakes, we're pushing data back up. How do you balance all of this as these lines blur? How do you continue with different sets of priorities? How do you manage that visibility and security and ongoing assessment?
We have to figure out risk tolerance for the customer and what they want to accomplish. So one of the biggest things that we're seeing is the AI and cloud. So using AI generates data that's fantastic. We can see patterns very quickly. We can get information out of it that's amazing, but that information isn't always accurate. So understanding the limitations there are important. And then cloud, a lot of the best tools live in the cloud. So it means that a customer who might want a siloed network, something that is entirely separated from the internet, now I've got to add tools that are opening them up to the internet in order to use some of the visibility or analytics that they require to work efficiently and effectively. So balancing those requirements, if you're talking about some of the risk inherent in that stuff, we are seeing with more integration, there is more risk. So being able to balance that stuff is a function of separating. We talked about blast radius earlier, right? Separating stuff out so that if something does happen, I'm minimizing the amount of space it's going to happen in. So if I have a function in my OT floor, I'm going to make sure that function is separated to the extent possible from the other functions, with the exception of what needs to be sent between those 2 points. We call that least privilege. We're minimizing our output, to the only the stuff that really needs to be transported. And the same thing at the outside edge. If I need to push stuff up to the cloud and back down from the cloud, I'm going to minimize the size of that. If I can put middleware in between that I trust, so that I can kind of look at that data that's going out and look at that data as it comes in to make sure that it's not being compromised, I'm going to use that as well as a way to validate that I'm not bringing something into my environment that I shouldn't. So there are a lot of tools that we can help to enable that will still allow those advanced functions to be used, like AI in the cloud, but we can use them safely within a validated environment just by making sure we understand what the customer's requirements are for validation.
So looking ahead, where do you see strategies evolving for cybersecurity in the next 3 to 5 years, or I don't know if it should be a shorter period of time or a longer period. It's changing quickly.
Say that can be answered in 2 letters, AI. So it's
much like everything else.
yes. And it like I just talked a minute ago about how AI is, we don't really trust it yet. We've all used ChatGPT and gotten some very strange answers back when we ask a question. So we're not entirely sure that we trust what AI is doing for us, but at the same time, we also recognize that it's become a required tool, that we really can't operate at the velocity that we need to without it. We're seeing that in the cybersecurity space as well. That if I have exactly the same stuff and I feed it to my cybersecurity tool that's balanced by AI, I'm going to get different stuff out both times. That's not a bad thing. It might see different insights the second time that I didn't see the first time. But the ability to look at patterns, to look at a large amount of raw data and get something out of it that makes sense and do so very quickly, it's absolutely invaluable. But the bad guys are using it too. AI also makes it easy for me to take a look at a network if instead of looking for open ports, I decide I want to attack eTech itself. Right. And I'm looking at eTech's open ports on some of these tools that have scanned some of our stuff. AI is going to give me more of an opportunity to see what exploits there are available on that stuff, because I can immediately ingest all the information that I have available and take a look and with the database that's available to the AI, figure out exactly the best way to attack this. It is terrifying. So without that support, you really need to have AI both defensively and the bad guys are using it offensively, because it is an amazing, amazing tool with an immense amount of power. So the evolution of security right now, we're seeing more tools that are more integrated. We're seeing more tools that are able to give us answers faster. We're seeing tools that are able to respond in real time and make changes to our network with or without us. And that is both good and bad. But AI is definitely the place that we're starting to see that we have been seeing the most change.
Yeah, I have just one final question before I get to our fun closing questions, which I will ask Wayne and Brian because I want everyone to participate. But my last question is, if there's a client listening or anyone, I guess they don't even have to be a client, but anyone listening, where should they start if they, cybersecurity is a priority and something they need to focus on? Where do they begin this process?
I may have mentioned this once or twice, but I think it should start with a conversation. I think those conversations, we have some very talented people, some people who are very good at this stuff, and I think having a conversation to understand what you're looking for. I mean, if someone's coming to us, they have a need already, and that defined need will help us at the starting point. It gives us a place to start the relationship and start working toward what the customer needs. So beginning with a conversation to make sure that we're really clear on what you need will help us to understand how to achieve it. We have some fantastic people and some amazing tools. We are very good at this.
It's not necessarily one size fits all.
It's not.
Do you have anything else that you want to ask before I move on to the fun questions, Wayne? Anything that we missed?
Just one. We've done a lot of differentiation here. Brian, you and I have both worked on greenfield and brownfield installations, and kind of differentiate. I mean, the tactics and the strategy is different, but the end result, the end goal is the same. Point out a couple of tactical differences.
Sure.
In the ones we've been exposed to.
Yeah, it's built-in versus Band-Aid, right? If I start with a greenfield and I have a customer who has an appetite to bake security, and it makes it very easy for us to do that at the low level. And we can start off with that assumption. It gives us the ability to choose equipment that supports what we need, to choose new OT gear that's actually going to have security baked in. It allows me to really build it in from the ground up, which makes it less expensive to implement. And it also means that every process and every piece of it has all that stuff already understood. If I'm working on a brownfield project, I am applying Band-Aids. There's definitely a difference there. We're dealing with an existing. Well, generally, we don't want to take the brownfield down for an extended period of time. Even if you're doing a full renovation on something, you're still looking at pieces of infrastructure that are going to be there regardless. There's a lot of substantial investment that's already gone into it that we don't want to replace if we don't have to. So the approach is very different. We're really looking at that blast radius. We're really looking at the segmentation as one of the primary pieces to make sure those older devices that don't necessarily have a lot of security built into them, that they're really focused in a small area so that we can keep them from pushing outward if something bad happens. So it's definitely a different approach, because we want to, in a brownfield, we're trying to achieve a goal, but we're trying to do so on existing infrastructure. And we're trying not to replace the most expensive stuff if possible. We're minimizing cost. So it's a function of how much can we replace and what do we need to mitigate instead of replace?
Well, that was a great ad. Okay, so now we're getting into the fun portion of the episode.
Having fun this whole time. I don't know what you're.
That's true. That's true. That was not a great.
In his zone right now, man.
This is what you talk about. That's what you like. So it is all fun, and I enjoy learning about it. So, but this I thought was a good topic to transition us into these closing questions. But what is one myth that on cybersecurity that you wish you could just make go away and never have to talk about again?
Sure. Cybersecurity doesn't have to be expensive. I think that's the first one. And there's a lot of stuff we can do, even with just a little bit of consultation that will help us to become more secure without having to spend a silly amount of money. I'm not saying that cybersecurity can't be expensive. It absolutely can be. Some of the stuff we can do to change, like the most cyber attacks start with phishing. So phishing education is not something that needs to be super expensive, but it's one of those things we can do that immediately lowers our risk at the outside edge. It doesn't necessarily have to cost like a substantial capex in order to get you a little more secure.
And one of I don't even remember who I was talking with. It might have been on a webinar we were producing a couple years ago, but they said one of the biggest, maybe not biggest, but one way that people or threat actors, hackers get in is by like the set password on devices that have never been changed.
Default passwords, yeah. That's a huge one. Default passwords are the bane of security's existence. It's bad news. But I mean, that's your phishing attacks. Most hackers are not hacking into things anymore. There are exploits, but the vast majority are just logging in. They're finding credentials on the web. So a lot of people don't like to remember a lot of passwords. So people reuse passwords all the time. So say your Google password was hacked. Your Google password is very likely to have something to do with the password user was. So if someone identifies a personnel that works at a company and they can find on the dark web, and there's whole marketplaces for this stuff, if they can find your passwords for other stuff on the dark web, it's easy for them to figure out what your password is inside. It is the opening edge. So after reconnaissance, the next thing is log on to get credentialed access. And credentialed access is not as challenging as it should be. And that's where those phishing attacks come in. And that's where making sure that you've got strong passwords and using strong passwords on a regular basis. That's where that stuff starts to become more important.
Cost effective way to mitigate risk. Yes.
Yep.
Wayne, do you have a myth that you would like to go away? Or
yeah, mine is not nearly as technical or as well thought out as Brian. The myth that, hey, I've got a firewall, I'm okay. A firewall is one little brick in the wall. And everybody think firewalls came out, I got my firewall set up, I'm good. Then like I said, as Brian said, you go ahead and you find all these other open access points that walk right around your firewall. There the firewall sits and it's beautiful and it's humming away and the lights blink, but everybody else is talking around it. So yes.
That's a good one too. If you could automate one thing in your life, what would it be?
If I could automate one thing, I would think it was to drive to work.
Well, you can get one of those self-driving cars. Or I actually don't know if they're for sale yet, but I know they exist.
They're getting there, but you talk about trust. Trusting a machine to drive me safely without killing anyone or myself. I'm not there yet. Yeah, I think that's probably the first thing that I would automate. Yeah.
What about you, Wayne?
Probably priority and schedule management. I mean, just
that was somebody else's too. Was like
so much going on, and like cybersecurity and risk, I've got so many channels that I have to monitor and prioritize, and be able to find stuff, prioritize it, and get it on my schedule in the most effective, efficient way would be awesome.
Yeah. I think it was Sarah's answer too, was like calendar management was the thing she wanted to automate. And I was like, that is a good one.
Agentic AI is coming. That's going to, we're starting to see people building out agents that will do that for them. Your multi-stream communications management, everything from Signal to Teams to your texting to email, all of it and one shot, one pane of glass. It's pretty cool stuff.
What about you, Jackie?
Oh man, mine is usually kind of boring. I just want somebody to like do my laundry, but include it in like putting it away. Like
I was going to say, you have a washing machine. That's a robot already. You're good.
Yes, it washes and dries, but does it ever make it back to the closet? No.
Doesn't fold, iron, and place back where it needs to be. Right?
How would you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
I sit in front of a computer and I look at the colors on the screen and I hit keys to change the screen so that the colors match what I like. That's what I do.
I'm going to I won't answer the question, but I'm going to elevate it to middle school level.
Okay.
Because I had the opportunity past couple of years to go to a middle school here in Raleigh near our office and meet with the general population, but then a couple of the robotics classes and just talk about automation and robotics in the world today.
Oh my
And
gosh, I
so
love
you
that.
got to use some real live examples of robotic applications and really trying to explain to them that robots aren't R2D2 and C3PO, and it's they're made for a purpose, and they're if you is it dangerous, boring, risky applications that you can turn over to something that'll do it over and over and over again. So, yeah, that experience and being able to explain at a middle grade level just to spark their interest in automation and engineering was pretty eye opening. It was pretty interesting.
That's awesome. I bet that was a lot of fun.
It was.
That is awesome. I will just add and do a shameless plug for future Beyond Tech episode. We are currently prepping one about just careers in automation and how people have joined our team. And that idea was brought on because there is not like a system integration degree. So everybody's coming into this field kind of from a lot of different angles, perspective, experience, and it's great. So yeah, stay tuned. That one will be coming out soon.
Cool.
And my last question is, what would you like to see us cover on future episodes of Beyond Tech, aside from the careers one that I just teased?
I think Wayne's robots, seeing robotics would be fantastic. I'm kind of stuck in the IT space most of the time. I'd love to see some of the, the cool OT stuff.
Yeah, that would be good. And yeah, one of the things one of the reasons I moved from engineer to business development, and I call myself a client success advocate, is I get to walk into a lot of different plants making a lot of different things, a lot of different problems. And one of the neatest things is being able to engage with that client, but then bring all the options of solutions that eTech provides. So I get to deal with cybersecurity over here and robotics over here and data lakes over here. And sometimes they blend together. Sometimes they're very isolated, but that diversity is one of the coolest things. Now, how do you get all that into, this is a mini series now, but that is one of the most unique things about my role and what eTech provides that make it so valuable and so much fun. But how you bundle that and articulate it is not easy either.
No, as someone who came into this role in marketing from a completely different industry, it is a lot to learn, but it's very exciting and very cool. And
And
one
it
of the reasons
continues
I
to,
like doing this podcast, I get to learn and talk to all different people in our company and learn a
and it
little bit.
changes and grows every day too.
Yes, it's never the same. All right. Well, that is all the questions I have. Just want to thank you, Wayne, for being my co-host today, and Brian,
Enjoyed
thanks
it. Thank you.
for sharing some insight and knowledge with everyone.
Had a great time.
And just thank you guys.